I'll never forget the moment I saw Jolene Blackwell, the president of our HOA, standing over our mailman with a metal baseball bat raised above her head. I was the one who called 911, and she was the one hauled away in handcuffs screaming about community standards while Clayton lay on the pavement bleeding. But to understand how everything spiraled into that nightmare, you have to know where it started, because nobody wakes up one morning and decides to assault a federal employee. No, this train wreck built up slowly, inch by inch, clipboard by clipboard, until there was no stopping it. I've lived in Willow Creek for 7 years, long enough to know the neighborhood has rules for everything. Lawn height, mailbox color, the exact shade of beige, your garage door must be painted. And honestly, I used to laugh about it. I work from home as a marketing consultant, so I've got a front row seat to the show every single day. From my office window, I've watched more petty arguments than I can count. People fighting over parking spaces, over Halloween decorations, over whether a rose bush counted as seasonal foliage. This place runs on conflict disguised as order. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for Jolene. Jolene Blackwell. 55, platinum bob cut, sharp enough to slice through drywall, beige blazer, red pen, neon blue whistle, and a hot pink clipboard she wielded like the 10 Commandments. She didn't walk. She patrolled heels, clicking like a metronome set to aggressive. If you ask anyone in Willow Creek to describe her, they'll all say the same thing: she was obsessed with control. And she didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. Then there was Clayton Shepard, our mailman for 18 years. The kind of guy who remembered birthdays and asked about your dog by name. The kind of guy you want in your neighborhood. The kind of guy who didn't deserve what was coming. The first time I realized something was off, I was watering my lawn. Well, pretending to water it, because if the HOA caught me using excessive water during restricted hours, I'd get slapped with a warning. I heard this shrill whistle, the kind that makes you flinch, and when I looked up, there was Jolene crouched by the mailbox cluster, like she was conducting a crime scene investigation, tape measure, clipboard, stopwatch. Everything short of chalk outlines. Clayton's truck pulled up and he hopped out with his usual smile. He didn't even see Jolene until she jabbed the clipboard into his chest and announced she needed to speak with him about serious violations. Violations for delivering mail. I stood there with my hose slowly flooding my sneakers because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Clayton tried to laugh it off, but Jolene was dead serious, quoting some imaginary regulation about the mailbox being off by 3 inches and accusing him of arriving outside the acceptable variance window. She actually said that. The acceptable variance window. Clayton explained that postal workers didn't deliver on an exact to-the-minute schedule and that if she had concerns, she could contact the post office directly. She didn't like that. Her face twitched, her pen scribbled harder, and she hissed, "This is my community, not our." That's the moment everything clicked. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it wasn't good. I walked over to Molly Tillman's porch. She's 70, lived here since the houses were built wise in the "I've seen every kind of crazy way." Molly just shook her head and said, "That woman isn't right. Mark my words." At first I tried to downplay it, but then Molly told me Jolene had been timing the garbage truck with a stopwatch for 6 weeks straight and had actually called the police because a kid drew hopscotch on the sidewalk. Chalk. Washable chalk. And suddenly that cold feeling hit me. The type you get when the sky looks clear but you know a storm is brewing on the horizon. The next warning came by email. Monday morning, 6:32 a.m., subject line in all caps. Urgent mail delivery irregularities. She sent a 23-row Excel spreadsheet tracking Clayton's route down to the second. She rated each infraction on a severity scale. She encouraged residents to document irregular behavior. No one replied. The silence was deafening. By Wednesday, she'd called an emergency HOA board meeting. I'm not on the board, but these meetings are technically open, so I went. Jolene had built a 34-slide PowerPoint titled Mail Delivery Crisis. She dissected Clayton's movements like she was presenting to the Supreme Court charts, time-stamped satellite photos, even a map with colored dots representing deviation points. I swear I expected her to pull out laser pointers. When she proposed sending a formal letter to the USPS demanding disciplinary action against Clayton, the board finally pushed back. Barrett, one of the board members, gently reminded her that the HOA couldn't regulate federal employees. Jolene's jaw clenched so tight I heard her teeth grind. The vote was 4-1 against her proposal. Jolene was the one. And instead of accepting defeat, she snapped her laptop shut and said, "If the board won't act, I will handle this personally." That line, "personally," felt like the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Then the cones showed up. Bright orange traffic cones placed in front of every mailbox cluster. Signs zip-tied to them saying, "Authorized personnel only, timed entry required." They looked so official at first that I honestly wondered if we had roadwork scheduled. But nope, it was Jolene. Clayton moved the cones aside gently, because he's a decent human, and Jolene came screeching around the corner in her SUV screaming that he was trespassing, destroying HOA property, and violating community safety protocols. She called the cops. The cop took one look at the cones, told Jolene she had no authority over federal mail delivery, warned her about obstructing a federal employee, and left. She didn't stop. She escalated. Camera. Stopwatch. Binoculars. Hours spent sitting in her SUV writing notes, watching Clayton like he was breaking into houses instead of delivering packages. We were all watching it happen, and none of us said anything. And that silence, that cowardly silence, felt like it was eating at my conscience. I started wondering if I was making this bigger than it was, if maybe I was overreacting, if maybe Jolene was just eccentric and harmless. Then Molly's voice echoed in my head. "You can only wait to see how much damage they'll do to prove they're right." And I realized I was tired of waiting. That's when I organized the meeting at my house. 12 neighbors showed up, 12 out of 240, and we drafted a petition to remove Jolene as HOA president. Over the weekend, we collected 78 signatures, not enough to represent a majority, but enough to show people were scared. We submitted it Monday morning. Monday night, Barrett called to tell me Jolene had hung up on him. She'd called us traitors, said we didn't understand what she was protecting the community from. The next morning, her SUV wasn't in her driveway. I thought maybe she'd finally back down. But 30 seconds later, I saw her car parked behind the maintenance shed engine, running hidden behind the hedges pointed toward the street where Clayton always made his loop. That's when the dread settled in my gut. Heavy, icy, certain. We were past the point of no return. Wednesday morning felt eerily normal. Sunny, quiet, peaceful. Kids on bikes. Sprinklers clicking on. It was almost enough to fool me. Almost. At 10:12, Clayton's truck rolled onto our street. I got a text from Molly. Her car's still behind the shed. Something's wrong. I walked to the window, heart pounding. Clayton stepped out of his truck with his bundle of keys jingling, smiling like always, completely unaware. That's when Jolene emerged, fast, purposeful, terrifyingly calm, carrying a metal bat. Black. Heavy. The kind you buy for serious practice, not weekend games. I froze. My brain couldn't process it fast enough. I tried to yell through the window, but nothing carried. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my phone dialing 911. I bolted out my front door, sprinting across my lawn. But I was too far away. Clayton heard her footsteps at the last second just as she swung. The bat slammed into his shoulder with a crack so awful it turned my stomach. He stumbled, confused, dropping the mail onto the pavement. He didn't even understand what was happening. She swung again, and again, screaming that he was ruining her community, that he didn't belong here. Her face twisted with some warped righteousness, like she believed this was justice. Clayton tried to crawl away, his arm bent at a sickening angle. "Please," he whispered, voice shaking. She didn't stop. I reached them just as the third neighbor, Mr. Langford, tackled her from behind. The bat hit the ground. 2 more neighbors rushed in to pull her away, her heels scraping the pavement as she kicked and screamed about violations and evidence and how none of us understand what's at stake. Clayton was barely conscious, bleeding from his forehead, his arm twisted unnaturally, ribs bruised so badly he winced every time he breathed. I knelt beside him, trying to keep my voice steady while everything inside me shook. The sirens came fast, thank God. Police ambulance flashing lights reflecting off the perfect Willow Creek lawns like some sick parody. Clayton was lifted onto a stretcher. Jolene was shoved into the back of a patrol car, still ranting, still insisting she had documentation proving she was right. Federal agents showed up 2 days later. They interviewed all of us, combed through emails, dash cam footage, group chats, everything. When they executed a search warrant on Jolene's house, what they found made my skin crawl. 14 clipboards, hundreds of photos of Clayton, spreadsheets with over 1,000 data entries, a handwritten journal with the final line: "He must be removed." Not disciplined, not corrected, removed. The trial came 6 weeks later. Federal court. Marble floors, flags, the whole thing. Clayton had a brace on his wrist and a thin scar across his forehead. He testified quietly, respectfully. Watching him describe the attack was harder than watching the attack itself. The prosecution played the video captured by Langford's phone. In a courtroom full of strangers and neighbors, that crack of the metal bat echoed like thunder. The jury watched Jolene step out from the hedge, watched the bat rise and fall, watched Clayton collapse. Jolene showed no emotion, not a flicker. After the evidence, after the journal, after the testimony, the verdict felt inevitable. Guilty on all counts: assault on a federal employee, obstruction of mail delivery, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, no early release. The last image I have of her is from that day, Jolene being led away by marshals. Her blazer wrinkled, her hands trembling just slightly, her eyes still filled with that same cold conviction, the conviction that she was right, that she did nothing wrong, that the rest of us were the problem. No relief washed over me, no satisfaction, just a heavy, exhausted ache, because Clayton deserved better. The neighborhood deserved better. And deep down I knew we'd all watched this ember turn into wildfire, and only stepped in once someone got burned. If there's one thing this whole nightmare taught me, it's this: silence is fuel for people who crave power, and they will take everything you refuse to defend.